Hello and welcome to Voices Unheard, produced by Unicorns Live. I'm your host, Jessica Samuels. My pronouns are she and her. And thank you for joining us this evening. My guest tonight is
Nicolette Rodriguez, Vice President of South Okanagan-Similkameen Pride Society and active community member.
All right, thank you. And we had a pre-conversation and we had actually quite the long one, so I'm looking forward to diving back in with Nicolette. Before I do that, I would like to acknowledge that I live, work, and play, and we all live and work and play on the ancestral, traditional, and unceded lands of the Okanagan Nation and the Syilx people. I would like to thank the Canada Kelowna Hotel and Conference Center for hosting us here this evening, and show sponsor Kelowna Pride as well. And now let's get back to Nicolette. Let's start with the South Okanagan-Similkameen Pride and the work that you do through Pride and how that dovetails with you personally. So talk about the work that you do with the Pride Center there.
So a big focus for us with the Pride Society is, getting members of our community to feel safe and to have a space, in the community where they're comfortable to attend and comfortable to, be themselves. And that's something that is really important to us. So whether it's spreading awareness or events, raising money, those are things that we focus on and, things that we tend to carry throughout the year.
Mm-hmm. When I was taking a look at the website, I was pleased and also noted that you had a fairly large statement about Black Lives Matter, about equity and inclusion and diversity across the board. And I thought that, I don't know why, I wasn't surprised, but it was kind of really nice to see. And so talk a bit about the importance when you say everyone feels included. You clearly don't just mean the Pride community.
Absolutely. And I think with the current, political climate, we've, had to do some introspective kind of looking into our organization and asking those tough questions. Are we inclusive? Are we considerate of, individuals and, different communities, and acknowledging that there's a lot of overlap that, occurs. So we're learning, and we're learning what it means to be an effective ally and doing our best to avoid performative actions and empowering individuals in our community to be who they are. So.
Interesting line there, effective ally, because I think allyship has taken, it's an evolving concept right now for some individuals, mm-hmm. right? What does ally mean, especially in particular to the BIPOC communities or the Pride community, and it doesn't only mean posting the black square or posting the rainbow. For South Okanagan-Similkameen Pride, what does it mean to be an effective ally?
So for us, it means to educate ourselves. So to, look outwards and to try and project the voices that are in our community who have been directly affected by some of the, occurrences that have been happening in the United States. Mm-hmm. I know that it's really important for us to, keep that sort of mentality in contrast to, our local community. We would like to make the most benefit in our community by understanding what goes on in other communities as well. So.
Mm-hmm. And how long have you been with the organization?
I've been with the organization approaching a year, actually.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And so this work, how much have you influenced this work? Because you're a person of color. And so did you bring some of that to the table, or was that already in line?
So from my perspective, I believe that, providing my experiences to our board has given us an opportunity to, discuss and to have some insight. I know that it's important for us to be willing to listen to individuals with lived experience. I'm pretty forward about, the sort of experiences that I've had in the community, and so I understand the importance of the work that Black Lives Matter organizations do, Canada, and of course in the United States. So.
Mm-hmm. Have amongst the community, have you seen through your work or through yourself as an individual some of these I guess, negative actions or opinions really come to life and rise to the top? I mean, how prevalent is it in Penticton, is a more specific question.
So, in my opinion, I think that it's really sparked a conversation. I recognize that diversity in our community, it's there, and I don't know that it's often represented very often. With that being said, our approach to things as an organization, my approach to things as an individual, if I am involved in a decision, that decision needs to be beneficial for all members of our community. I just think that the conversations that I'm having in community spaces are, taking that step back and listening and doing our best to try and understand the impacts. So I think that, it's been interesting to sort of see, people kind of coming to and realizing that this is a problem, and just because it's not occurring directly in our community doesn't mean that it's something we shouldn't be concerned about. So.
Mm-hmm. And so what specifically are you talking about in that instance? What's maybe not occurring directly in the community?
So I guess observable police brutality. So it would be pretty naive of me to assume that it's never occurred in Penticton or it's never occurred in the Okanagan, because I can't provide you with a specific example. With that being said, the prevalence of body cams and the lived experiences of individuals and the stories they've shared regarding police brutality, it's very well and alive in Canada. And I think that, it's important for us to be aware of that. If we feel like it's a not in my backyard kind of mentality, if we take that approach, what sort of approach will we take when it is happening? So.
Doesn't it make it harder to get people to come on side if you're in a position of saying this is happening here or not as overt? We have covert elements happening. Like, have you had to bring a few people along the way in that regard?
So myself, I'd like to think that people are, instinctively pretty empathetic. And I know that a lot of the times, like allyship, for some people, it sounds like work or it's something that's taking them out of their comfort zone. As far as the individuals in Penticton are concerned, I would love to think that, with a few things in mind, that they would be willing to make subtle changes or big changes if they knew the sort of benefits that it would have to members in their community. So.
The word empathy, you mentioned it there, and you mentioned it in our conversation earlier, and it's such a hopeful word, isn't it? And I think it's something that maybe people can use more openly, and also help them to come along in these times that we're living in. What's the importance of empathy to you as an individual in your life?
So, in my personal experience, a lot of the meaningful friendships and the relationships that I've had as an individual, they've been built really around being vulnerable with one another and trusting relationships. And I think that trust oftentimes is built through empathy, taking a moment to look into someone else's perspective and try and understand why they're going through the things that they're going through. I think that if you pause and take a moment and really kind of put yourself in someone's shoes, it's easier to be empathetic. So without empathy, we can't be vulnerable. And without being vulnerable, if no one feels like they can be vulnerable, then we'll never have lasting relationships. Everyone's going to be guarded, and I just don't think it's really healthy for anyone. So.
And empathy is the type of thing that you have to nurture. I mean, it doesn't come easily to everyone. And so, what's some of the ways that you foster that in your community?
So, with our youth specifically, so as an individual who is employed at the YMCA, I work with youth who have diverse abilities and they're aged 13 to 18. So with those individuals, it's important that we try and foster their strengths and to try and recognize when they are doing exceptionally well in areas of their life that may or may not go noticed. So in my personal opinion, in fostering strengths in one another and recognizing the things that we do well as individuals, I personally believe that it's a really good, approach to providing like empathy for one another.
And what role did empathy play for you when you were growing up as a young child? And did you have lots of instances of empathy?
Absolutely. So I would be very forward in saying that I'm very much a product of the community that I live in. Empathy was extended to me in multiple, different situations throughout my life, whether it was in, middle school or high school or during Christmas time. A lot of times empathy was extended to me when I didn't have the space to, to be reciprocal. And so that unforgiving, well, not unforgiving, but that, relentless empathy, like you'll come around sort of mentality, I think is just incredible. And I think that it's really pulling people, to the forefront in community, and it's making people, it's empowering individuals in our community. I feel very strongly about that.
And so it's formed, and here you are employed at the Y, which is known across Canada for giving empathy and giving families and youth a hand up and help. And then, of course, in the work that you're doing. And so what I'm hearing is a strong sense of community.
Absolutely. I think that's very important. The collaborative process in different community organizations, just coming together to meet the needs of, our neighbors, our coworkers, whomever. I feel very strongly that the impact in a smaller community is felt immediately. It's not something that that is getting kind of lost in the weeds or anything like that. I feel strongly that work that's done in community is being applied directly to individuals we may know. So
Right. And when you introduced, you said the South Okanagan-Similkameen Pride is a community organization, and I wonder your thoughts on how people feel towards, pride organizations. And you kind of touched upon it a little bit there. You said the services are directed to the people who need it. Do you think there's a sense, or in Penticton, that anyone can come in and see what's going on with Pride, or is it still pretty directed to a specific community?
So just kind of going back to what I had said is, we do focus on providing that sense of belonging for individuals in our community, and that sense of safety and that sense of security.
In the Pride community.
In the Pride community,
Right.
However, we always welcome allyship from, different communities and different backgrounds, whether that's, supportive businesses, or, parents. There's so many different individuals in the community who maybe wouldn't consider themselves a direct member, but are, very effective allies in, empowering individuals in our community to do wonderful things for others. So I feel very strongly that, our organization, although focused on members of our community, is again very, very, welcoming to allyship and in any form. So
I guess too, the question is like, what specifically is that allyship looking like? So programs and services for the Pride community, but also for the non-Pride community. Are you talking about like business partnerships, and obviously you're a fundraising endeavor and putting on events and that type of stuff. Like what specifically is helpful?
I think from a stakeholder perspective, if we're planning an event, and mind you, it's been pretty difficult in this past year with the COVID situation, but we do look to, different stakeholders in the community to try and assist us in providing, that safety and security to members in our community. And I personally believe that a lot of the overlap happens maybe where an event is happening, and it's really beautiful to see individuals kind of coinciding where maybe they wouldn't have before. So.
And for you as an individual, what does allyship look like in your personal life?
So for me, it's listening. So I need to be an effective ally. I need to be willing to listen. And listening isn't just sitting across from somebody and not talking. I think it's validating their experiences and trying to disseminate the meaning in the things that they're saying. I try really hard to do that, and I know that it's not always possible. I'm not perfect, but I think that if I feel like I've been successful, generally speaking, there's been a connection that's kind of come from that situation. So.
And obviously you receiving that as well, because you were talking about when you're an ally, but when you feel that someone is an ally for you or to you, would be the similar listening, understanding, and accepting that there's going to be times where we're going to step in it. Like it's an interesting time we're in right now, because I think some people may want to be allies, but they're just worried about stepping in it badly. And so what's the best way to handle that? I'd love to hear what you think about it.
One of the best things that has kind of been said in conversations that I've had, maybe where we're sitting and addressing bias, is in the conversations, the experiences that are being shared, and the multitude of topics that are being, that affect individuals in many communities, and, people who are facing lots and lots of, discrimination, and people who are marginalized. It's important for us to understand that, yes, we need to listen, but in a conversation, we very may well say the wrong thing. And if tomorrow we wake up and we say, hey, that wasn't okay, or that was something that I've realized is not, correct, it's not wrong of us to come together again and to try and acknowledge that and to try and understand why it was wrong.
I guess people are worried about, they don't want to make mistakes or be embarrassed, or I think it's hurt feelings, or you don't want to offend the individual by using the wrong pronouns or the wrong term, or even to move it away from that, do you say person of color? Do you say black person? Do you say, I am hearing people saying that it's hard to navigate.
Absolutely.
And then do you ask? Do you say to someone, okay, what term do you prefer? Do you prefer person of color? Do you prefer, BIPOC, or what have you? What are your thoughts on that part of it?
So, without diminishing experiences in, very, very well-defined communities, I generally just ask for their name. And I say this because when you get to know someone on an individual level, on the basis of, hi, my name's Nicolette, I think that very strongly, and maybe naively sometimes, that the experiences will come through the connection, they'll come through the vulnerability, through the empathy. Again, being that active ally by listening. I believe strongly that, I'm not upset when I'm misgendered. I think that the way that I approach that situation after or following it up, I think is more important to me personally. However, I can recognize in that specific instance maybe where it's a little more harmful to others. So I try to try and find that balance for sure.
How do you approach it in those situations? If someone has, and you said misgendered, what do you do? What do you say?
So yesterday, I was, shopping for some clothing, maybe what I'm wearing right now, and I was
You look
at
great.
Thank you very much. And I was at a store, and I had some clothing items on the table, and a woman was like, I think she was kind of directing some other staff member to get another size for me. So she was like, "Can you get him another size?" And then she kind of caught herself, and she looked at me, and she was like, "Oh, I mean her or him, or I'm so sorry, like I'm just getting used to this. I don't know what to say." And I said, "My name is Nicolette." That's what I said. And I think that the way that I carried myself and the sort of poise that I kept throughout the conversation, I'm not to say that it kind of, maybe I should have corrected her. Maybe I should have made a point of saying, "Hey, these are my pronouns." But in the moment, I felt like that was the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm. It wouldn't be the first time on this show we talked about walking that line of getting to know the individual, getting to know Nicolette, and then getting to know the pronouns and then the various categories. And you're not the first person to say, I'm not just, but I am Nicolette. I am Robert. I am Ashley. And it's interesting because during this process, it's an interesting line for me to walk because I want to get to know you, but then at what point do we start talking about the other stuff? And whatever the other stuff is, right?
Totally.
Yeah, I think it's an example of the world that we live in.
Absolutely.
And what are your thoughts on that, about people's need to kind of categorize all of us, not just yourself?
Totally. I think pronouns have been very politicized in, the past coming years. Regardless of the conclusions that you have or what sort of opinions you have on pronouns, it's the fact that they're so closely attached to the identity of people it's undeniable. I personally believe that my pronouns, being in a privileged situation where for the most part they're pretty well respected, I can still understand that that's a position of privilege. And I do try and hold the pronouns of others, to something as valuable as their name. I think that if the pronoun that I'm using is incorrect, I can apologize, and I want to know how to be correct. I want to know how to make you feel comfortable. It's something I'm willing to do, and again, it kind of goes back to willing to be wrong. I think is something that I'm okay with, and I'm okay on the other side of things as well. So.
It's an interesting, just sticking on the pronouns things as well, for in kind of out there, and we've talked about just kind of normalizing and just making pronouns part of I'm Jessica Samuels, she and her. But what I'm noticing more is in things like workplaces and the email signatures. Totally. And again, it's an interesting line because I gave a land acknowledgement off the top of this show, and I think that's important, and we're seeing those in email signatures. But I'm just wondering, at what point is it, I don't know, it makes me think of appropriation, and I don't know if that's the right word, or performative, like we talked about, like I'm going to put my pronouns in my email signature. And I want to make sure that people know that I'm not diminishing the importance of talking about this, but from where it comes, from each individual. And so I invite you, that's a long way of me saying, what are your thoughts on that?
Totally. I see potential for there to kind of soften the landing for individuals who are coming to terms with their identity. For example, I believe when I started my job about 2 years ago approximately, I had a manager, and he had his pronouns in his email signature. Mind you, a cis individual, maybe not somebody that I would have, I mean, I'm guilty of making assumptions as well, you know, but I think that at a first glance, I wasn't somebody that I would have seen, you know, taking that step to try and make others feel uncomfortable or more comfortable in a space. And at the time, it wasn't relevant to me, you know, just coming to some conclusions in my life. But in hindsight, it was incredible to see, because when I go to put my pronouns in my email signature, I do so knowing that I'm not isolated or I'm not the only one. So I do see the benefit. On the flip side of that, I think that it can be difficult sometimes to sit in a space and to maybe be part of like a gender or sexually diverse community, and to have a room of individuals who are primarily cis from, you know, what we can observe, and to have everyone go through their pronouns and then to be the individual who maybe leans on them a little more. And I guess in my opinion, it can be difficult. I think there's that subconscious thought that this is being done for you in that moment. And it's almost as if you kind of just want to like curl into the chair a little sometimes and just get it over with. So,
Right. Yeah. You and I we talked a little bit about this, but we talked about in relationship to Black Lives Matter, or, you know, kind of that element of, just in your friend group or whatever, and they're jumping on board, and you're wondering, okay, well, thank you, but is it because you're my friend, or is it because is it coming from a place of, I've said before, authenticity or learning, or but I think you know what we're doing here, the discussion around it and the understanding that there's no one answer, and we're gonna step in it. I'm gonna step in it. I have stepped in it, and the learning and where we move forward from there.
Totally, absolutely.
As a person of color, are there other particular elements that you bring to this, and within the Pride community? Because I'm always interested to know any of the nuances and how that plays out. We know that across the Okanagan, we're a fairly Caucasian group. And so were there parts of that with your journey that came up and were an issue, or was it just kind of rolled into being Nicolette?
So I think there's always some subconscious thoughts regarding our, you know, is the color of my skin coming into play? I don't want to play into the idea of a meritocracy too much here. And I say this because it's important to understand that there will be situations where an individual's resume, their personal skills, their personality is maybe impacted by their appearance. So whether that's the color of their skin or their gender identity, I think that I choose to try and I look more inwards for myself. So I don't focus on what I can't control. I try and look outwards and try and, you know, maybe make the next decision for someone else a little harder. As far as, you know, decisions or things that have kind of impacted my life, it's really hard to tell. And I think that I do connect with individuals pretty well sometimes, and sometimes I don't. And I tend to lean on the conversations that I have where I do connect. Sometimes you don't really hear about the ones where, you know, it doesn't really go very well. And I think for myself, it's just a really interesting conversation for me, because it's definitely something that I do need to kind of focus and to try and understand more about, especially when it comes to my own experiences, definitely.
And when you're saying that, are you talking about, to put it bluntly, the color of your skin, the role, the color of your skin?
Totally. I just don't know that it has impacted me as openly as it has when I was little. So when I was little, it was definitely in play, I would say. And it was, you know, from being called like poo skin to, you know, just generally speaking, feeling devalued for not really being what would be, I guess, ideal. Just growing up and hearing like, oh, I don't like, you know, brown, whatever. And
Yeah.
people openly expressing their preferences like that. I think for myself, you do internalize things like that over time. And it's definitely something that I'm still trying to overcome. I guess the way we as a society look at beauty, it's harmful to not only myself, but to a lot of people. It's very harmful. I wish that it wasn't so, you know, I wish it didn't lean on the dominant identity in most spaces. I wish that was just maybe a little bit more forgiving. So.
And it's tough. I mean, and I often talk about or think about it's the subtle messaging. So just like it's the subtle racism or the subtle prejudice, it's that subtle messaging when it comes to beauty or even thoughts about masculinity and what a man should do and be like, and or what a mom should do or what a dad should do. And it's those, you know, I trust me, I don't want to blame it on media. It's not media, but I call it like those commercials. I call it like the commercials between the show where it just shows, you know, the certain things, and it's just that 1 minute where it just, you're bombarded with that sense, but you don't realize it, and you're filing it away. And how many commercials are you watching in a night, during the week, in the month? And it can erode slowly, and you may not even realize. And then you're about to go out in the world and be your best self, and you don't look like
everybody else.
Right.
Well,
right.
representation matters. So seeing somebody in a movie or, you know, seeing somebody in a position of power, I think representation is very important. And I just wish that it wasn't so politicized sometimes. I think that the reason an individual is, you know, in any particular movie, in any position of power, in any sort of film, I think that there can often be, you know, a conversation started around the reasoning surround why that person may be in that position, instead of, you know, and maybe looking or ignoring, you know, the sort of things they've accomplished to get there. So whether it's a star in a movie or, you know, a person who is holding a high-level position, that person put in the work to get there. And that's really important. But representation matters, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, that's an interesting comment you make, also holding space for recognizing that the work that they did in order to achieve, to reach the same finish line that so many others have they would have started, you know, 100 yards back. I mean, again, and there's that part of that earlier discussion we had about how do you acknowledge the whole self without, you know, making a show of it or tokenism.
Definitely.
Or all of those things. I mean, it's a bit of a dance.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So as we get ready to wrap up, what are, you know, I always ask people to, you know, some final thoughts for anyone watching or anyone who sees that the work that you're doing yourself or with the South Okanagan-Similkameen Pride.
Totally.
What are some thoughts you want to leave our viewers with tonight?
So in this time of, you know, uncertainty, you know, be it COVID, I mean, we're in a hotel and there's a lot of smoke everywhere. I just strongly believe that it's unearthing, you know, a lot of deep kind of feelings in people, so like negative feelings. And I think at the end of the day, it's important that we, try and look inwards. So whether that's looking for, mental health supports or, self-care, those things are really important. And we can't really help others unless we can kind of help ourselves. It's not always true, but it's a really good starting point. I think that, with our organization right now, we're really looking at continuing to provide value to our membership. And in my personal life and in my job, I'm really looking at, listening and trying to be impactful and do things in a meaningful way. I'm just really ready for 2020 to be over.
Amen to that. Thank you for sharing your story and having this conversation with me tonight. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Thank you to everyone who tuned in and watched. And a special note about next week, which is the final show of season 1. The show will be on Tuesday. It will air at 12 noon because it is Pride Week and there will be all kinds of other great things going on. So we have a special time, noon on Tuesday, with our final guest of season 1, Wilbur Turner. I will see you then. Have a great night.